Hey everybody, welcome back. Today, throwing out a little update on something that we've been working on. Here it is. This is our first prototype for the Bully. The Bully's the follow-up speaker, our next model up from the Brute that we recently introduced, where we kind of threw our hat into the ring of everybody offering old school speakers. It's quite popular right now, and they're a lot of fun. I have to admit, they may not do everything to the nth degree, but they do a lot of things really well. And we found out from some of the development work that we did on the Brute that it just about can do everything and do everything well. We spent a lot of time in developing, making sure that we did a lot of things right, and we were really happy with that thing. And man, those things are just crushing it. The customers are loving those things. And this is the next step up. Let's look at this cabinet design first of all. Yes, it's big, it's old school, and it's got a big 1.5-inch thick front baffle that houses this massive 12-inch servo-controlled woofer. Now, it's braced like a tank. There's a brace here, there's one here, there's one here, then there's a divider between the drivers here, and then the MTM section has a sealed airspace that goes to about right here. So all that is in its own airspace, and the rest of the airspace behind those drivers and to this side are all part of the airspace of the lower section. And there's just a lattice of cross bracing that goes all through this thing that makes it just rock hard. So that's the kind of attention to detail we put into something like this. We're going to do an old school speaker, right? The one thing we don't want to be like the old school speakers, they had flimsy boxes. And when you stuck big woofers in flimsy boxes, they resonated like crazy and made a ton of noise. This one will not. You're going to get to hear the music and not a bunch of cabinet noise. Now, the other cool thing about the Bully, we stepped this up from the Brute, and we're doing an MTM here. These are two of our M130s that are 16 ohm drivers in parallel. So we're right back to an 8 ohm load. Easy load to drive, but sensitivity went right on up. Yes, sir, 94.5 dB sensitivity. Let's look at a frequency response on it, just the on-axis response. And let's look at it compared to the Brute, which was also measured really, really well. We've got the Bully at 94.5 dB sensitivity and the Brute down there at 90.5 dB sensitivity. Now, the cool thing about that is you can drive them with anything. A little 9-watt 300B tube amp, a little chip amp, just anything. Or you can drive them with a big amp in a big room and put lots of juice to them and get a lot of output out of them. All that stuff is not a problem. So lots of flexibility there. Let's look at some of the measurements on these things too. I'm really excited about this. So let's look at, first of all, the crossover response. And you'll note that we're able to bring this tweeter down pretty low, and there's very few parts in the signal path. Because of the way we've arranged this, because of the offset drivers on this front baffle and the asymmetrical surface reflections, we've managed to get really flat responses from the drivers before we even start putting parts on these things. So we're not having to make a lot of corrections. And we've noticed with the Brute that what you can do is, instead of aiming the speakers right at your head at your listening position, to angle them out just a little. Toe them somewhere between aimed right at you and aimed straight out in the room, somewhere in that range. And what happens is this surface reflection from this panel on the side tends to go past you to the sides. It doesn't reflect right at you, and it doesn't make the sound as if it's playing from the baffle forward like a typical big box, big speaker baffle. Angling them out that way a little bit, and with them here at this side and very little surface reflection, almost none on this side, makes it really transparent. I expect the same exact things here with the Bully. Let's look also at the lower end of the range there. You can see that the woofers are starting to roll off there at the lower end. Let's look at that compared to the Brute. You'll notice the Brute did the same thing, but the Brute had a passive 12-inch woofer under it, and you can see how it lifted that bottom end and flattened out the response. The measurement we're looking at here on the Bully is not with the woofer on it. So it's just the MTM section only. Once you add the lower woofer, it will create that flat response, and not only a flat response, but a flat response to 20 hertz. Yeah, the servo-controlled woofers will play flat to 20 hertz and 3 dB down in the teens. And they'll do anything you want, meaning you can adjust it with a one-band EQ, and you can adjust a narrow or a wide band with that EQ. You can fix a peak or a dip. You've got adjustable damping settings, adjustable extension filters. There's a rumble filter built into it in case you're playing vinyl. You can make the frequency response do anything you want. So the versatility that this brings is incredible. You could cram these into a small room, a medium-sized room. You can put them in a big room. It doesn't matter. Typically with a lot of big speakers, when you put them in a room that's too small for the speaker, you tend to overload the room real easily. I mean, too much bass, too boomy, too whatever, because it all couples into that room, and it just jacks the whole bottom end up, and you have no way of adjusting it other than trying to move the speakers away from the walls, add tons of room treatment to the room and things like that, which can be done. But having the flexibility of just being able to turn the volume down, pull the crossover back, change everything about the output of this to make it do anything that you want is a lot of flexibility. I mean, you can make it do anything. So small rooms, medium-sized rooms, anything you want, it will kill it. And let's look at the rest of the measurements. I'm excited, you can tell. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Let's look at the vertical off-axis response. The vertical off-axis response in these things look fantastic. And one of the reasons is the close center-to-center spacing of the drivers. So when you're moving up and down, you're not changing the time arrival between the tweeter and the two woofers by very much. And you're not changing the time arrival between the two woofers very much either. So, and the other thing that helps is the crossover point is really, really low. So with the tweeter playing down really low, it's kind of like having a big oblong coaxial driver. So let's look at the vertical off-axis, and you can see that it hardly moves as you move up or down. And that's great for keeping an even room response. Also, let's look at the horizontal off-axis, and there's two of these measurements. So we're going to look at horizontal off-axis going to the left and horizontal off-axis going to the right. And as you can see, it's still very smooth in the horizontal off-axis in both directions. Looking at the impedance curve on this thing, it's a pretty even load across the board there. It dips to about 4.6 ohms. Let's see, what was it? Dips to 4.5 ohms down at the tweeter end, because it is a 4 ohm tweeter, and we only have half an ohm of resistance in line with it. We're not pulling it down very much. This is almost as loud as it can play. So very little in the signal path. There's a rise down there in the low frequency range because we've got a large cap value pulling the bottom end off of these things. So they are allowed to go down fairly low in its first order, so you're going to get a lot of your mid-bass, and your tightness and your quickness is going to be coming right out of these drivers. We're letting them play down a little lower than what we did with the single woofer on the Bully, because we're going to cross it to this servo-controlled woofer, so we push that crossover point down a little bit. Now here's my favorite part. One of my favorite parts. Let's look at the spectral decay. Man, that thing is clean. I mean, smooth all the way across the board. That means this thing plays and it stops. There's no ringing. There's no stored energy. There's no long woofer decay. These things are fast. I mean, really, really fast. So I'm excited to get a pair up playing. Kelly now is making us a finished pair. Now that we've used this one as a test box for testing. He's sending us a finished pair that we'll build out, and I will set those things up in here and listen to them, and if there's any tweaking that needs to be done, we'll figure that out, and at that point we'll get a total for the price on everything. It's going to be fairly reasonable, but it's also going to be up there a little more because servo-controlled woofer. You've got a big woofer. We got its own amplifier that's built into the speaker. So again, your amplifier is just going to have to power this upper section. So you can split from your preamp You can split a signal, one going to your main amp that powers this section and one going to the servo amp that powers the woofer. Even if you don't have two outputs, you can split it. Another thing you can do is you can do a speaker level output, so your amplifier is sending the signal to the speaker, and your amplifier is also sending a signal to the speaker level input that's on the amplifier. So you got multiple ways of doing this. So even if you've got an integrated amplifier, you can still run these things no problem. Speaker level or RCA inputs. So tons of versatility all the way around. So we'll get this figured out as far as pricing. We're going to offer this thing as just a kit, and you can download the plans and build this yourself if you want. It's a little more complicated cabinet build, or you can order a flat pack, which is all CNC cut, ready to go. All you got to do is glue the stuff up. Or we can do finished cabinets, finished veneered, beautiful, done. Order finished cabinets, order the kit, you put it together yourself, have some fun. Or I think we're going to offer this fully assembled as well. So a lot of options going on for this. So I'm really excited about it. It's probably going to be one of the most fun speakers that we've done in a long time. And it's going to be a do-everything speaker. So all of you guys out there that have been eyeballing this thing, it's coming. And these would also make great left and right speakers in a home theater. You wouldn't even need external subs. Left and right. And then we have a center channel that's the XCS Bravo that is this center section. It's the exact same drivers on its side as a center channel. So for you theater guys, this may be a great solution for your whole front section. So that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this little update, and there'll be more coming soon on the Bully. See you guys in the next one.